All right. So my name is Aaron Yarmel, and I'm joined here today with Priya Sahani. Priya is one of the co-founders of the global animal rights network, Direct Action Everywhere. Her investigatory work has been featured in the New York Times and the Washington Post and Truth Out. So Priya, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on here.
Excellent. Thank you. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk to you about today, but the main reason why you're here is because you had an incredibly successful disruption of the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos. The entire thing was kind of mind blowing. Everything from the tactics that that sort of went into this, the response, and just some of the response that you're still dealing with today with some of the legal charges with it. So I thought we could do is just sort of go through what happened that day, piece by piece, so we can get a really clear picture of it. So first of all, why don't we just talk about like why you did it? So what was the motivation? Like why Jeff Bezos? Why Amazon?
Jeff Bezos is the world's richest man, and Amazon is the largest online retail company, and it's growing not only online, but Amazon is expanding into the grocery business. Amazon recently bought Whole Foods, and Jeff Bezos is so rich that he can go and buy the Washington Post for, I think, a few $1 million in cash. And so the thing about Jeff Bezos and Amazon is that these are massive entities, and at this point Jeff is not even a person. He's equivalent to a corporation, and nobody holds these companies and these individuals accountable. In fact, someone said this to me, and it's not I haven't fact checked it yet, but apparently I was the first person to confront Jeff Bezos, and that's because he does not like criticism and he will do whatever he can to stay away from it. But it's time that these companies start responding to what's happening inside of their behind the scenes of what it takes to make these companies so rich. A few months ago, I was arrested at Petaluma Poultry, which is a supplier to Amazon, and you'll routinely hear Amazon, responding to these claims and saying, "We don't own this farm." But what sticks out to me is that despite the fact that they don't own Petaluma Poultry, they still sell their products. They still sell bodies of chickens on their website. So regardless of whatever you say, Amazon has more of a connection with Petaluma Poultry than we did when we first investigated it. So why is it that people who have no money, like myself and other activists, nonprofit organizations, ordinary people, are taking more action and accountability for what's happening to these animals than the companies who are profiting off of their bodies?
Yeah, I mean that's such a powerful statement. I think one of the reasons why this disruption has been so successful is just the beauty and elegance and the power of the way that you talk about it. And I'm really excited to sort of delve into this in more depth with you. Why don't we work through that in some detail? So one of the first things you said was that you were the first person to confront Jeff Bezos,
Mhm.
and I think that what a lot of people think when a disruption happens is, well, why use disruption? Um, and I think that in this case, part of the reason it seems like there's really no other way of reaching him. Is that right?
Yeah, we have tried to send an open letter to Jeff Bezos. We have tried to email the company. And not only can you not get in touch with Jeff Bezos, forget that. You can't even get in touch with anybody who's willing to have a conversation. And you routinely get tossed around and say, like, oh, you can go talk to this person, you can talk to that person. So what we're seeing is that Amazon is a faceless corporation. You can't address any of your issues with any individual, and you'll just get you will get the runaround. And so this was in many ways our last resort. We've tried to send you open letters, we've tried to email your company, we've tried to ask if we can have a sit down, if we can get Amazon to address what's the cruel products that they're selling on their website, but we haven't been able to get in touch with anyone. So in many ways, I was forced to take this action, because if we were able to have a sit down conversation with Jeff Bezos, I don't think I would need to do this.
Yeah. So it's really like there's two options. Either he doesn't get held accountable at all, and there's no way of actually reading, sending criticisms to him, or you do a disruptive protest. And it's almost like if somebody wants to criticize disruption, really what they're doing in effect is saying Jeff Bezos doesn't get to be held accountable. And I think that that's another reason why your protest has been so well received. I mean, I think people are really seeing that this is the two options that we have, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because in this instance, we got less flack for disrupting, for doing a disruption than we do in other instances. And I think one of the reasons is that Amazon and Jeff Bezos are not sympathetic characters. And in instances like this, it really does emphasize the importance of disruption because I think even ordinary people who otherwise wouldn't do what I did are kind of like, I can see this woman's point. Here's this man talking about how he wants to make an impact as far as climate change. I mean, he's touting about how him and Robert Downey Jr. really want to expand into, other planets because there's an environmental crisis on Earth. Well, what about addressing what's happening on this planet before you start colonizing Mars and other planets? Come on, Jeff. And if you're going to be making statements like this, someone has to come and say, "Hey, if you say you care about the planet, what about starting with addressing this issue?" And Jeff, you have the power to turn around the course of animal agriculture, what's happening to animals, but also what's happening with the environment. I mean, he literally has the power, resources, and the reputation to accomplish all of those things. Yet he's not doing it, and part of the reason is because no one's confronted him about it.
Wow. And so, what is it like to? Because this seems like a big change. Like one thing you mentioned was that in this particular disruption, you're not taking flack for it. Like the coverage has been overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
Um, and you've done a lot of other actions that don't quite have that level of appeal to the general public. That's not usually their purpose. Like typically when you're doing a disruption, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna get everybody in the audience to love me. Um, but what is it like to be in the situation where, in this particular case, people are really thrilled with you?
Well, I mean, I'm not the type of person who's easily discouraged when people are disappointed, because I do know that if you're doing something right, you are probably going to receive some flack for it, and if you're not, then you're just not pushing the envelope enough. But I do think this instance does go to show that there is power in taking nonviolent direct action. And if you look at past social justice movements and in individuals like Emmeline Pankhurst, who did exactly the same thing, who would go and interrupt parliament hearings and get their message heard, because when they would ask nicely and when they would say, "Hey, I want to have a conversation about women's rights and I want to be able to submit my vote," they would get laughed at. People would laugh them out of the parliament room, and that's when she decided, you know what, enough is enough, and we need to get our message heard, and we need to get the issue of animal rights on the table. And in this instant, not only are people not disappointed and not questioning our tactics, but they're like, "Hey, this is a good point. This woman's just asking a question and offering him a flower and just saying, you have the power to do something about this because you're the richest man on this planet. Can you please help?" So I think people see the contrast of the disruption, and hopefully the tone that we in DXC try to have, which is, we're not here to attack you. We're here to ask if you can help. And, we're here with love in our hearts, even for the most uh, notorious, people like Jeff, who are quite frankly trying to take over the world.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that is awesome. So I think we've talked a little about the motivation now. We've talked a little about the reception. Let's talk about tactics. So I don't know how you folks do it like in DXC. I don't really want to know. It seems like you have some magic where somehow you're able to make it into these like ridiculous type of situations where you shouldn't be able to get on there. How did you get onto the stage with a flower to disrupt the world's richest man who has one of the most impressive security apparatuses that I've ever heard of?
Well, this is an ongoing investigation, and as you know, I'm being charged with felony burglary. So, as my lawyers have asked me to, I won't be talking too much in detail, but I
Okay.
will say I think the mentality is more important than the actual tactics.
Okay.
And whenever we're taking actions like this, you just have to be open to the possibility of what what we're capable of. And done enough disruptions where I know kind of human behavior,
Hmm.
and one of the things that we overestimate is human error.
Hmm.
And I think if you can take advantage of human error, it's pretty easy. Self confidence goes a really, really long way. Just having that ability to that I think it's confidence and presence, and also just knowing that. To me, whenever I do these disruptions, I always accept that I'm probably going to fail.
Hmm.
Once you've accepted that you're going to fail, then you kind of are like, okay, now I can really give myself to this and do whatever I can to succeed. Because if you've already accepted that you're going to fail, then you have nothing to lose. And so, even until the moment that I got in, I was like, I'm probably not going to get in, but I'm going to, I'm meant to be here. And I really truly do feel like I like was meant to be there, because here's this like room full of people who are talking about artificial intelligence and et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I'm meant to be here. I have a message that's meant to be heard too. So I think that goes a long way. And I have to give credit to our protest team and our direct action team who train people. And we literally have a training called tier 2 training. Tier 2 protests are protests like the one, actually this was a tier 3 protest, which is like the stakes are high, but the impact is incredibly, it has a chance of going really viral. And we train people on how to get inside of these events, and that those trainings have helped me a lot. And also doing little disruptions, like when we were really young in DXC, like the Bacon Festival disruption. I remember once I one time I was trying to get into a bacon festival, and there was a table blocking the entire thing, and I just crawled underneath the table, and the guy was like, "You need to get out," and I was like, "I'm leaving," but I was like crawling towards the event, so he was confused. He's like, "She's saying she's leaving, but she's like continuing to go towards the venue." And once you can confuse people, it's really easy to be able to get in anywhere. So humans will continue to be humans, and even security, even Jeff Bezos security, quite frankly, are just humans.
Hmm. Wow, that is fascinating. Couple of points you made there, I think I really want to sort of delve into a little bit. First thing I think you said was, we talked about the mentality, and the mentality has to do with like, I think I'm going, or you accept the possibility of failure.
Yeah,
And once you've done that, it makes you a whole lot freer to take action. I
yeah,
think about when I was studying violin performance at the Eastman School of Music. I remember once asking my orchestral repertoire teacher, like, how do we get over a stage fright? And what he said was, well, you have to really come to terms with the terror of death. Or once you realize that you're going to die and you're going to fail in the worst way possible because you will become like not even existent after a certain point, then it kind of puts other things in perspective, and you're free to sort of perform at a much higher level. Um, and does that speak at all to like what it's like for you to think about the the inevitable or the possibility of failure?
it's funny that you mentioned that. Recently I just read a book called When Things Fall Apart, and I like to consider myself a very spiritual person, and one of the things that the book talked about is how most of our fears as humans is based on the fear of death.
Hmm.
And once you accept that we're all going to die, it's funny how simple and easy life becomes, because all of our fears are rooted in this fear of death. And the reason we even have fear in our consciousness is because all humans know that ultimately we're going to die. So we do whatever we can to ignore that. And as a society, we're just, we're a fear based society. And whether it comes to getting arrested, whether it comes to going to prison, whether it comes to taking action, whether it comes to speaking out against things that are considered normal. So, yeah, it's ironic that you brought that up, because I definitely thought about that. And that's why I just said, like, I'm just going to accept that I'm probably going to fail. And once you accept that you're probably going to fail or you're going to die, you're just like, okay, I'm just going to live. I'm going to live freely. I'm going to do whatever I can to live my life more beautifully. And that kind of translates to the actions that you take too.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think like so often we forget that we're going to die, or we forget that failure is always something that might happen, and then it's like, oh, I have to build the world's largest corporation because maybe that'll protect me from the terror of death. But at the end of the day, I think that if we can get beyond that, we can take the sorts of actions that you did. Okay, so we talked a little about the motivation. We talked about as much tactics as I think we can, given the sorts of constraints that you're under. What was it like to be you going through this? So like, what did it feel like psychologically when you stood up? What was it like to walk up there and just sort of walk us through the event? Give us what it's like to be
Yeah.
Priya.
So I went through about 10 security checkpoints, and every single security checkpoint, I was like, there's a possibility that I just get caught right now. And, yeah, I actually stopped thinking about that and I just got in the zone and I was like, I'm meant to be here. You know, I'm an executive, like I'm here. So just make the most of it. And by the time I was at my last security checkpoint, I said like, okay, if I get through this, then I'll go to the next step. But I wasn't thinking about anything besides getting inside. So I made it through the final checkpoint and I saw Jeff Bezos talking on stage and I was like, I'm about to change your life. And that was like a really exhilarating feeling for me. And then I had like some time to weigh my options. Should I go up now and should I wait? And I just decided like, I think I need to do this soon because I saw police dogs and security everywhere, which is when I realized, okay, I'm probably about to get arrested because if there's police dogs and security, like there's no way that, they're just going to let me go and be like, oh, you just disrupted Jeff, you can leave through the back door. So I went up to the front and found the best position I could be in. Sat next to a woman, and I had heels on, and I was like, "There's no way I'm getting on stage with heels." So that's what I was kind of thinking. I was like, "I need to take off my heels and run to the stage." And then I realized, like, no, running is not going to work. If I just walk, I'll confuse people. And it was dark because they were trying to make it this like cool out of planet experience. And so that really really helped me. And so I just started walking on stage, and when I was walking up to the stage, I was just weighing, like, I was just thinking, how long am I going to have to get my message? And it became really clear to me after I saw the security that I have to be fast with whatever I'm saying. So that's when I was thinking of, okay, Matt, my friend, Matt was like, make sure whatever you're going to say, you say it in the first few seconds. So I remembered that and I was like, thank you, Matt. That's really helpful. So I found the stairs and the stage is really high. So I went onto the stairs from the back and then I got on stage. And then had my white flower and I was headed towards Jeff. I actually couldn't make it there,
Mhm.
but we did lock eyes pretty firmly. And, yeah, that's when I basically asked or just said, hey, Jeff, my name is Priya Sahani, and I've been inside of Amazon's farms, which your company supplies from, and I've seen animals being criminally abused. You're the richest man on this planet. You have the power to help them. Will you please help them? And yeah, I mean, he looked really shocked and definitely has like a very chilling presence. And I just remember in a few seconds, I was dragged off stage by security, and he kind of like turned his head to watch me leave. And he definitely could have stopped it and said, hey, let's have this conversation. But obviously, he's not going to do that, which I knew was going to happen. So they quickly took me off the stage, took me behind, and then I was like swarmed by tons of um, security people who were trying to figure out and ask, like, how did you get in here? Who are you? And I was very cooperative with the police. One of the police officers was like, I don't know why they're doing this. I would just let you out the back door. And yeah, so from there on, it was like lots of waiting, sitting in a hot car, just waiting to get taken to the police station, waiting to uh, get my, get booked. And yeah, so I was in there in jail for 3 days. And the thing that I was thinking was like, oh, I just got arrested, and like I knew we should have had a camera person. I don't know if any of that made it on any press. So I was kind of depressed about that for the first 7 hours that I was sitting in jail until I called Matt. And Matt was like, Priya, you're everywhere. That you disrupted Jeff. And I was, because I called him to let him know, like, hey, I did the disruption. And like he was like, oh, I know. I've seen the videos and the photos. So that instantly made me so happy because I was like, okay, I got arrested, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah. So let's go through some of that. So you locked eyes with Jeff Bezos. Let's go
Yes.
back to that moment.
Mhm.
That's an intimate moment with Jeff Bezos that hardly anybody gets to have.
Yeah.
Can you describe like what that was like and just some more detail? Because I'd love to find out.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm definitely like the type of person who observes people's nonverbal body language a lot. So I was really looking out for. He was really taken back, and I think
Hmm.
he was genuinely intimidated and surprised, and I think he was pissed off that, um, that I was able to make it on stage to confront him, because we know about Jeff and he genuinely does not like critics. He goes out of his way to not be at conferences like this. He rarely accepts these sort of invitations to speak, and it's because of this. He does not like criticism. And if you know anything about Amazon, they are not very, they don't like criticism very much. And so, yeah, in that moment, time kind of freezes, and I was just looking like, I think the thing that kind of made me really excited was Jeff is going to look me up and he's going to know who I am. And that's a little scary because he has a lot of power,
Oh yeah,
He could really, he could he could offer Las Vegas County and city like millions of dollars and say, make sure this person's imprisoned for like
yeah.
at least 10 years. He could do that.
Okay. I mean, he
Um,
could buy like he could just buy Las Vegas.
he could, yeah,
And there's all,
he could like buy Las Vegas.
yeah,
So that's, I will say that was kind of scary, and it was going through my head. I was like, oh my gosh, so it was kind of like thrilling and exhilarating, but it was also really scary. Like, he's gonna look me up.
yeah,
And I also remember thinking, this is kind of a silly thought that I had, but I disrupted John Mackey, and we know that John Mackey and Jeff Bezos know each other. So I was like, that's going to be a funny text message conversation they have. Like, oh, a few years ago, the same woman disrupted me. I'm sorry you went through that.
yeah. Like, hey, so sorry, bro. Like, yeah, I know what it's like. It is weird to think about people that powerful just like texting with one another. Um, but so when you talk about that look and just sort of his reaction of anger, being taken aback and kind of pissed off, I think what's so powerful about that in our current moment is that we're moving to a place where if you have enough money, you never have to see another poor person again. And it's not to say that like you're a poor person, but I mean, compared to Jeff
I
Bezos,
am.
or like there used to be these institutions like football games where you'd have like the wealthy alumni of a school sitting next to your college student, everybody's sort of interacting. But nowadays, like you can just go buy your box seat, and you can just go on these like golden little walkways that get you from point A to point B, where you never have to interact with the public. So I think that like in our current moment, our current inegalitarian society, where we've just erected these huge boundaries, the fact that you're able to have that just that look with Jeff Bezos, I think is incredibly significant. Um,
That's a really good point. And I think Jeff definitely lives in an alternate universe. I mean, I really hate to judge people based on who they are, but I think I think it's kind of obvious that Jeff is very disconnected from the average person. This is someone whose everyday conversation involves how to make more profit for Amazon, how to expand Amazon to literally take over the world, and
mhm.
also how we can colonize space. This is what Jeff Bezos talks about on a regular basis. So he's very much disconnected from the average human. And I think that he probably doesn't understand that, or think to himself like, I'm the richest man on this planet, like on a daily basis. um, and having like some understanding of wealth and people who are rich, I do think that he probably is always trying to get richer. Like, I think that's his life goal, trying to take more power, trying to get more rich. And so I think it was a healthy reminder for him too, that he is really powerful and that he has power to do good, and he's not using it for good.
Yeah, powerful stuff. So there's one thing that you said at the beginning. I think it relates to what you just said, and it has to do with using one's power to do good. Towards the beginning of the call, you were talking a little bit about how you went and you investigated one of Amazon's suppliers, right? And you have no connection to the suppliers whatsoever.
No.
And Amazon clearly does, right? Now, there's this old idea in business ethics that gets traced to like Milton Friedman, where we think that the only responsibility of a business is just to make a profit, and they should be trying to enrich their shareholders, right? And I think that another powerful thing that you're doing with this disruption is you're saying, look, Amazon, you have responsibilities to all sorts of different stakeholder groups that go way beyond just your shareholders. And I was wondering if we just talk a little bit about that. So what do you think Amazon's responsibilities are to society?
Well, I mean, they state on their website itself, and I don't, I should know this by heart, but they talk about how they care about doing good, and some of their values are, and they state their values on their website, and about how they want to do good in society, that they want to uphold values, and that they care about animal welfare. So they're not they're violating their own standards. and they're violating their own standards that they put up themselves because they sell foie gras, they still sell fur, they still sell dog fighting gear. So this company clearly is like violating its own animal welfare standards, and this is very common with most other companies. But I do think that Amazon in particular has a greater responsibility than most other companies because it is the largest online retailer in the world and it's monopolizing, like, it's literally taking over our entire online world, but it's also taking over the grocery business. And even if we wanted to boycott these companies, which we don't, if you come to the one of the DXC houses, you'll see that like outside we buy tons of stuff on Amazon because we have to. Um, we wouldn't be able to make a difference because boycotting these companies is not an option. Like we wouldn't even make a dent. And and someone has to hold these companies accountable. And I think that Amazon does have a responsibility, especially if they're going to be expanding into these other markets, to give back to your community, to listen to people who are on the front lines, working on environmental change, working on animal rights, and currently they don't do that, and they don't even get close to it, and that's because of the culture that Jeff has set, which is let's get more profit, let's make more money, let's take over, let's get more power.
Yeah, powerful stuff. And I just let's just go into that a little bit. It seems like one thing you're saying is that Amazon is becoming so large and so all encompassing that they then take on additional responsibilities that you just wouldn't have if you were just a small, single proprietor business, something like that. I think one way of exploring this is just to think of them as like a private government. And this comes out of Elizabeth Anderson's work, but it's
Yeah.
this idea that they are basically like an insular little government, to which they have just arbitrary and unaccountable power over the lives of their workers and over all sorts of different suppliers. And because they're the only game in town, over lots of customers, as well. And when you have that kind of power, we need to have some greater accountability mechanisms in order to turn them from like a private government into something where we're able to talk to them and we're able to raise concerns and like bring them into conversations about the public good. And I think I think that's just sort of another thing that's going on in this kind of response to the disruption. Where I think part of why people are so in favor of what you did is because um, you can't help but see Amazon as a tyrannical private government.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that, but it's really intriguing. And when you're this big, yeah, you can kind of see how they would be very similar to like a small private government, especially when they have the power to, like I said, like literally, if Jeff wanted to, he could buy the entire city of Las Vegas, and he certainly has the power to um, influence the police. So when you have that much wealth, you do start embodying almost this police force. He pays $1.6 million to security detail every single year. So
Just
um,
wild.
it's
And, yeah,
absurd. $1.6 million every single year. That's just bizarre.
yeah. And let's talk about the police force that he has, or the the protection force he has. So you've interacted with a lot of police officers in your time, and you've also now interacted with his private security force. What
I
was
might,
the go
I'm
for it?
not sure because they kind of conceal themselves, but I think that there were so many people that I wouldn't be surprised if one of them was Jeff Bezos' private security.
Got it. Okay. So you don't know if you interacted with his private security? Okay, I see.
I mean, I was sworn by a lot of security. Most of it was ARIA security, but some people didn't have a badge, and I couldn't tell who they were. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if one of them was. Maybe I was dragged out by Jeff's security. Like I don't know. I don't see why that wouldn't be the case because if they're protecting him, like I'm sure the people who are supposed to be the closest to him are are those people. And whoever, I don't know who this person was, but they literally threatened me and said, or at least I perceived it as a threat. They said, if you have any other friends doing this, you better let us know because you could have gotten hurt up there. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, we have weapons. And, like what you did was really threatening and you could have gotten hurt. And I was like, are you threatening me or my friends? Like, I went up there with a flower for that reason because I knew that there was a chance that who knows, there was recently a shooting in Las Vegas and people are being overly cautious. Like, I might get shot.
Yeah, and I think this is another reason why we need accountability. When there's a when there's like a police shooting, there's typically this move to bring them under greater public scrutiny. But when we have private security forces of $1.6 million private security force, and no mechanism for evaluating them and figuring out whether what they're doing is actually promoting the public good, we get into this territory where it even seems like a more dangerous private government than even before.
Yeah.
So it's this like, yeah, it's a really
Yeah, no,
scary
and
thing.
that's scary because like who's gonna hold Jeff Bezos security accountable? And I actually wasn't thinking about that when I went up on stage because that genuinely would have scared me.
Hmm.
But I just hoped that, a smaller woman with like a flower is probably not as scary as like a Matt Johnson, who's like this big guy and can come off as threatening. So it was probably better that um, that a woman did this action.
Yeah, I think that's important. Yeah, you with the flower versus Matt Johnson with a microphone. I think I would vote for you. How powerful stuff. So we talked a little about social responsibility. Let's talk about courage. So when I think of courageous people, I think you're one of the first people that comes to mind. Even sort of before this action, this was sort of how I viewed you, just looking at some of your actions over the last couple of years. And when I think about courage, I always go back to Aristotle. And when Aristotle talked about virtues, he talked about how there's like a vice of excess and a vice of deficiency. So the vicious person with respect to courage is either going to be deficient, where they're just going to be timid and stay home and never do anything, or they're going to be rash, just going to just this foolish bravery where they rush into battle and they get themselves destroyed. They don't actually do any good. And the courageous person goes down the middle. They're not too rash and they're not too timid. And I'm wondering if you could just reflect a little bit on that, and you let me know, how do you think about living courageously?
Yeah, I love that you asked me this because this is another one of the topics that I routinely think about. Courage is something that um, courage and fear are actually what both two sides of the same coin. And if you don't have fear, really don't have courage. Um, and so I routinely think about that. What are the things that scare you? And once you can really deeply think about the things that scare you, you can actually begin to be courageous. But if you're not doing things that scare you, then you really can't be courageous. And for me, the things that scare me are not public speaking. It's not jumping up on stage. For someone like me, that's like an easy thing to do. Main, a lot because of my personality. So I actually don't think of myself as courageous for disrupting Jeff Bezos. I will say my courage comes in when I have to sit inside of a jail cell which has no windows because I'm extremely claustrophobic, and I also genuinely have a fear of being alone. And this was my third time in jail, and this time was different because I was in Las Vegas by myself. Every other time I've had my friends with me, and that's when you really start to build courage because I don't have my friends to comfort me, and I don't have, I have no idea how long I'm going to be locked up in this room with strangers or by myself. And that's when I thought, that's when you really start to ask yourself, like, is this worth it? Am I brave enough to continuously keep doing this, keep doing things that scare me? And it's funny because this time instead of having physical symptoms of anxiety, I was like laughing
Hmm.
in this jail cell where I was like, this should be scaring the hell out of me, but it's not. And um, and it wasn't because I wasn't scared. It's because I realized that just the fact that I'm here again, confronting my fears, despite many people telling me, like, I don't think you can handle this. People close to me, people, my friends and family saying, like, you are not the type of person who can be in jail. Like, you're not the type of person who can be alone. And you just don't have the personality for it. Many people told me that. And I think in that moment is when you find courage and say, yeah, this really scared me, and here I am. And not only am I able to sit here in this room where I feel like, I should be gasping for breath and like just really feeling anxious, but I'm actually okay. And so I think having courage is really having a relationship with courage is having a relationship with fear, and constantly embracing your fears. And as a society, like I said, we live in a fear-based society, and it's not because we have a relationship with fear, it's because we're always trying to run away from it. And there's a wonderful in the book that I was telling you about. There's a wonderful metaphor about this about the author talking about this friend she has who had these nightmares about being chased by monsters, and these monsters would chase her in her nightmare every single night. And then finally, the author said to the woman, "Why don't you turn around and look at the monsters?" And then that night, she in her dream looked at the monsters, and then she never had that nightmare again.
Huh. Wow, I love that. That's wonderful. So when you talk about courage, it's not simply about not. It's the opposite of not having fear. It's about being afraid, knowing what the harms are, knowing what you're facing, and then finding some way to like live with that and act anyways. Is that fair?
That's exactly it. And Mahatma Gandhi once said that fear has its purpose, cowardice has none. And I think
Hmm.
that's so true. Fear definitely has a purpose. If you know you're scared of something, you know what you have to do. If you're willing to do it. But if you're if you cowardice is just not knowing that you have fears, or like not even like thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that really spoke a lot to me.
That's wonderful. And so I think that this is also helpful for anybody watching an action. When we're talking about what things you're doing that are courageous, when I watch you in the future, I think I'm going to think, okay, so that speech wasn't courageous, but there's the risk of jail, and
Yeah.
putting Priya in jail is something where that does take some genuine courage, because that is something that you're afraid of, the fear of being alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I mean, it's the other way too. I know some people who like they can spend like 5 days in a room by themselves and they're not
Mhm.
affected by it at all, but they're so deathly scared of public speaking. And the fact that they do it anyway, I'm like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You're just, or it can be like talking to people, or
Mhm.
like I don't know, whatever it is, whatever pushes you to be an activist that you know you have to do, but you are scared of doing it.
Cool. And I'd love to connect this to what we were talking about earlier with, coming to terms with like things like death or coming to terms with failure. So when you're thinking about coming to terms with like failing in the action, or even coming to terms with your own mortality, it's not that you come to terms with it and then you're okay with it. It's not that the fear ever goes away. It's just more that I'm no longer going to pretend that I can prevent these bad things from happening, and I'm going to act with the knowledge that I might fail, and I'm afraid of the bad things that could happen if I do fail. But I'll do it anyways. And I think that movement towards doing it has a lot to do with what we're talking about with courage. So,
Yeah. No, no, definitely. Yeah, no, I mean everything you said, I completely agree with, and it's the movement,
mhm.
it's doing something, it's taking action, it's living life and accepting that we do so many things because, and especially like in an activist community, there's always reasons to feel not fear, but there's reasons to have a pause, like should I do this, because how is this gonna we care a lot about the impressions that we make. And I also recently read actually a book in jail, is like ask yourself, are you doing things to make an impression, or are you doing things to make a difference? And
Hmm.
if you're doing things to make a difference, then all of a sudden it really doesn't matter if you're going to fail, because you're at least trying to make a difference. But if you're trying to make an impression, then of course you're going to be scared of failing, because that means that your reputation's on the line and you're thinking about, it's a motivation coming from the wrong place, when really we should be thinking about impact that people are making for animals. And this is why I love Matt. Matt really inspires me because he's always like doing the most absurd things, and he's not scared about making an impression. He's genuinely like, how can I make a difference for animals? And that really inspires me. And I take my inspiration from people like Matt, who are constantly thinking about animal liberation, to the point where I'm like, do you even think about anything else?
Wow. Yeah, Matt is an inspiring person. I think another way of talking about this idea is like, what would you like to fail at? Or what would you like to fail as? Because there's going to be failure as a part of your life. Would you like to fail as an activist, or would you rather fail as a violinist? I think it's misleading to think about what it's like to succeed. It's like, oh yeah, I would love to succeed in business, or I'd love to succeed as the violin, or as an activism. But I think a more helpful thing is there's going to be some dark nights of the soul, and when you're going through that, what clothes do you want to be wearing? Do you want to be wearing the clothes of an activist or of something else? And I think that, I imagine you sitting in jail, and tell me if this is accurate. It seems like you would rather suffer as an activist and go through the difficult challenges of life as an activist than do it as like some PR consultant for a Fortune 500 company.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And honestly, the motivation for that is animals, because like I said, when you are sitting, when you are faced to confront, when you are forced to confront your fears, or you put yourself in that position, you're like, is this worth it? And you definitely ask yourself that. And I think one of the things that really sticks out to me is that um, whenever I'm when you're in jail, you kind of experience a small reality of what animals experience, because they're confined. But unlike us, they don't get phone calls. They don't get to make phone calls to their friends. They don't get to, they can't knock, and they can't have a conversation with the people who are throwing them in confinement. And I remember sitting when I was being transferred to Las Vegas County Jail, in like the small van, and it's like really small and looks like a cage. And I just had this glimpse of being a bunny inside of a vivisection lab, and what it feels like to be locked up. And the moment that the door opens is not because you're going to be let out, it's because someone's going to be shoving some laundry detergent down your mouth, or burning your eyes with some chemicals. And I think you really develop this great appreciation for your life. And all of a sudden, when you measure your suffering with that of animals, it pales in comparison. And you're almost happy, like, wow, look at me. I'm only going to be here for 3 days and I'll get out. Whereas some animals live their entire life in confinement. And that is scary. Like, I don't think I could do that. This I can do.
Yeah. Wow. And I think another fascinating thing about you going to jail is that you basically took the social escalator, where you went from talking to Jeff Bezos, who's the most privileged person in our entire society, to talking to some of the worst off humans in our society, and being in a situation where the analogy that made sense was to think about the worst off individuals in our society, these animals in vivisection or in farming. And I was
Yeah.
wondering if could you talk a little bit about some of the conversations that you had in jail?
I had so many incredible conversations. I talk to women who are in there for prostitution, women who are in there for not paying their speeding tickets, women who are in there for doing drugs. And, these are some amazing, incredible human beings. In fact, I have to write to one of them, because I actually had an opportunity, which I took up. I just saw all these women inside of the holding cell really wanting to share their experiences. And I asked them, like, hey, I host a women's circle back in my house. Would you like to do this here? If you want, we can all just go around and talk about where we want to be in the next year. And everyone was interested. So I actually had an opportunity to hear from these women in jail and hear some of their aspirations. And they're just like us. They want to be a better mom. They want to make a difference in society. They want to not get thrown in jail again because of the circumstances that they live in. And I think hearing those stories really inspire you, because I have the privilege of not living the kind of life that they're forced to live, which is being with abusive partners, being born to a family where you don't have the privilege of being educated. You don't have the privilege of knowing whether you're going to eat the next day, whether you're going to have a home to live in. And you don't have the privilege of denying drugs, because that's your only escape. And I talked to this one particular woman who was sleeping next to me, and I wish I'd talked to her more, but I spent a lot of time just writing and sleeping, honestly, because I was so tired after the ALC. And she talked about how she wants me to be her mentor, which was honestly such an honor. Like, that was probably my biggest proud moment. And the reason for that is because I think there's so many people who need our help, and we don't get to be put in situations like that. And she said, I really feel like I've lived a lot of my life in fear, and I don't want to live my life this way. And I think you can help me. Will you help me? And that just brought tears to my eyes, because I said, of course I'll help you. I'm going to send you a book, which I actually need to do. And I feel bad I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to be doing it soon. Um, and I'm just excited to be able to do that for these young women who are like 23 years old, and they are already in jail and probably going to be in jail for a few years. And I think that really inspires you to see that there's people that we can help everywhere we go. And it's up to us whether we whether we take that opportunity or not. So I felt really honored when she asked me if I can be her mentor. and feel guilty that I haven't done anything about it. So I'm going to send her that book that I was telling you about.
Yeah. Oh, that when things fall apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is wonderful. We've talked a lot about accountability today, and I think that the women who you met in jail, we haven't built good mechanisms in our society to hold our government accountable to them and to hold Jeff Bezos accountable to them. And so I think that's another reason why it's so powerful that you're able to talk to them and you're able to help empower people and learn from people's stories, and then also just sort of take that and try to help create the kind of social change where we will truly have a society that is accountable to everybody. Uh,
Yeah, and I can't wait for that day because we really shouldn't, there's no need for slaughterhouses, there's no need for prisons. There's there is a need to rehabilitate people. There's a need to help animals, to help people who aren't as privileged as us, and those people include non-human animals. So it's all part of the same vision, which is liberation for humans and for non-humans.
it's wonderful. Um, and so I want to pivot to one last question that I have, and it has to do with the kind of, I guess we can sort of segue to it by talking a little bit more about the women's circle that you established in
Yeah.
in jail. And so I do a lot of dialogue facilitation. Like one of the things I'm
Mhm.
really interested in is getting people together from different walks of life and having conversations about important issues and trying to find like some meaningful progress on it. And I think that what you see when you do that is you see miniature communities. And in any sort of communities, you need to have the right amount of tension. Where on the one hand, you need to be able to have a basic level of collaboration in order to be able to have any sort of collective project. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, you need to have enough conflict that bad ideas get disrupted and you get like new ideas coming into play. And even if the old ideas are working pretty well, it still makes sense to have people come in and bring some challenges and criticize them. And so what I wonder is, as a lead, as sort of a community leader in direct action everywhere, how do you think about having the right amount of tension? So like the right amount of conflict within a community, so that we still have enough stability to keep our collective projects going, but there's enough conflict that things get challenged and we get innovation, things like that.
Yeah, challenges are really important, and I know that Wayne and our core leadership team, we talk about this often, that disagreement is incredibly important. And it is, I do think that if we don't have disagreement, we're really not doing something right. So, if we're not being challenged on like, hey, are you really using the proper recruitment methods? Are you using the right tactics? Is it helpful that we're not having conversations about people leaving our community and about recidivism? And I think recently we've had a lot of those people, these points brought up. Right now we're having a conversation and a dialogue and a disagreement, you could call it a healthy one, about whether the Kamala Harris disruption was effective or not.
Hmm.
And that's a really good example because we have divided opinions on this, but at the same time it's a good dialogue to have because we weren't having this dialogue before. And it brings up important issues that we could learn from, but also important points that we get challenged on. And and I think there's some disagreements that are really healthy to have, and there's other ones that are not. And I think the disagreements that are healthy to have are always about strategy and tactics, and personal disagreements are also healthy and can be really really awesome. But I think that in movement building there is a tendency for, how do I say this? There is a tendency for the animal rights movement and other movements to attract people who um, have a propensity to escalate in ways that are not healthy and to create conflict. And, I'm not saying that can't be changed, but as someone who's been an organizer for a long time, it is a pattern that I've seen. And I think that, and I think that And I think that what distinguishes healthy disagreements and healthy conflict is people's character and their intentions. So someone could be like, I vehemently disagree with DXC's tactics, but we can maintain a really positive tone and that person can have really good intentions. Like, I disagree with you because I want you to learn and because I want our community to grow and because I want us to be effective for animals. But at the same time, someone can completely disagree with you and like not have those good intentions, and that really does and they're going to be unhappy regardless of whatever you do. In which case, I think the answer is that you do have to probably create some separation and hope for support them in the best way you can, but also not work in the same environment.
Yeah, wow, a lot of fascinating threads in there. Um, I think one thing you said that I think we can empathize that if you want to understand the sociology of animal rights movements, I think you have to think about orientations towards conflict. And you can think about some people who are, so I call them crisis files and crisis phobes. And I think of your crisis files as ones who say, yeah, we need to always be escalating conflict into crisis. We want to burn the whole system down. Whenever something goes wrong, let's just destroy it. And then that's not healthy, because if you have that attitude, you're not going to ever be able to create stable enough structures to start a project today and pursue it until tomorrow. Then you get your crisis phobes, and they're the ones who are like, oh, well, we have these structures, and we need to be able to protect them, because if we don't protect our structures, then we won't be able to ever actually make progress till tomorrow. And that's unhealthy too, for the reason why you just disrupted Jeff Bezos. We need to create crisis sometimes, create that
Yeah.
productive kind of crisis. And I think the challenge is that the people who are drawn towards social movements, especially movements like the animal rights movement, tend more towards the crisis file part of the spectrum, because they have this orientation towards change where they're like, yeah, we got to escalate conflict. Put them all in a room together, and it's very difficult to have stable orientations, right?
I'm
And
laughing because it's so true.
yeah,
And I think
it,
the answer, and I think the way you get around that, and we've seen this a lot, is people want to take direct action against Whole Foods and Amazon, but then they also want to take direct action against the individuals who are in the movement, and that's just it's not going to work. And yeah, you really can't. I mean, even when we confront people like Jeff Bezos, we try to do it in like a loving tone. So the least we can do is extend ourselves that same love and kindness that we would to other corporations. Like you routinely hear vegans and animal rights activists talking about how Whole Foods like tries to do the best, so at least be nice to them. Okay, that's really good criticism. Can we apply that to ourselves too? So I think one of the things that we talk about in DXE is attacking systems, not individuals, because it's much easier to have love for individuals and hatred for the system, anger towards the system. And I think if we have that mentality, it's a lot easier to love people inside of the system while still despising and wanting to dismantle animal agriculture.
yeah, no, that makes sense. And when we think about that, it seems like there's sometimes we need to have more orientation towards crisis, other times you want to have more orientation away from it. How do you help people in your organization try to chart a path, between crisis phobia and crisis philia?
Quite frankly, I don't think we've talked much about this. And I mean, maybe we have in other contexts, but I think um, yeah, I think I would have to reiterate the fact that let's escalate crisis in a very strategic way towards corporations like Amazon, because that's probably going to be more helpful towards the movement than if we're escalating conflict within, within organizations towards individuals. So I think just focusing on let's direct our anger towards systems rather than individuals. And when there is a lot of anger towards individuals, let's try to have an open mind on both sides and see what we can all do to change and how we can be open to feedback and criticism, and also be willing to change. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, I think DXE, we've had a fair share of conflict and we need to work on these things. We need to be more be more willing to try different things. And we're not perfect. We only get a shot to do this once. It's not every day that you get to be a leader in the animal rights movement. And I think the question then becomes, what can we do to learn from our history, but also from people who study this, like yourself, and like give us give us good answers and good solutions that we can try.
Yeah, it's so hard. I think that's a really thoughtful answer. I love that. I think there's another challenge that you have, which comes out of what you said about a few minutes ago. Is that in a lot of organizations like PETA, you have this strong corporate structure, and it's very easy to have a hierarchical chain of command, and you can say, okay, we're going to use corporate HR tactics to deal with conflicts and all that. Then you have more community-based organizations where it's just a community, and then you sort of use community-based ways of dealing with conflict. Where in your corporation, it might be like, oh, this person's not performing their tasks well enough, we're going to fire them. But in a community, it's more like, well, we're not going to fire you for not, we're not going to kick you out of my friends group just for not performing well. It's more like, are you violating certain kinds of values and norms? And I think that what makes your job so difficult, Priya, is that DXE is both a corporation and a grassroots community. And it's corporate in the sense that you're doing these really high level tactics and you have a fundraising apparatus, and there needs to be some specialization of labor. Like you need to have like Matt Johnson mastering press stuff and somebody else mastering other things. And once you get that kind of specialization, you're leading that huge number of people, there's bound to be some sort of hierarchical organization. Um, so I think what's so tough is that the tools for managing corporations are mismatched for dealing with conflict in the community part, and the tools for dealing with conflict in the community part are mismatched for dealing with conflict in the corporate part. So I think you have to, yeah. Does that does that resonate with?
Oh yeah, yeah. And then I think it's a tension that you have to. Yeah, I think it's a tension that become has become very evident. Um, because in some ways you're right. Like we do need to be more. We need to be more corporate when we're trying to specialize, but we also need to be more like people when we're trying to deal with personalities and individuals. And at the end of the day, you know, people don't have to be in DXC if they don't want to. It's like it's a labor of love. And one thing we always try to keep in mind is that people are doing this. A lot of like most people in DXC are doing this because this is a labor of love and just appreciating whatever people do. Um, and they're not always going to be perfect, but we have a concept where we actually took from Google called radical candor. If you have an issue with someone, go and talk to them about it. Don't talk behind their back because um, that creates a toxic culture, which again, it's very hard to live up to because as humans, I think there's, you know, studies showing that one of the reasons we even have language is because we wanted to gossip about people.
Mhm.
So it's hard to challenge your um, ancient patterns in that way. Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I gossip about people, and then you just kind of have to learn, like, hey, Priya, you're not supposed to do that. And I'm grateful for every single time someone tells me, hey, you should probably not be saying that. And I think that they're right. Like, you should not be saying things behind people's back that you're not willing to say to them. So, being open to feedback and criticism is, is really important in movement building.
Yeah, and I think what's so challenging about that is even when it comes to rules like no gossip, I'm sure there's going to be some cases where you're going to want to have a conversation about somebody before you talk to them. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure you talked to Matt Johnson about me before you agreed to do this conversation, right? Um,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like oh sorry, there's a school across the street from where I am, and all the horns are honking because
Okay,
they're
I
letting
can't
out a thing.
hear.
Yeah. So I think like sometimes you want to do that, and I think sometimes also I might not know how to approach somebody. I'm like I have a conflict with this person. You know, can I work through this issue with you before I talk to them because it'll be helpful. I think
Yeah.
yeah. So
And I
it's
think
hard. Yeah.
intention really matters there too, right? Like if are you genuinely just trying to, you know, I want to know about how I can best approach this person, and your intention is not to completely um, damage their reputation or like just like indulge in shit talk.
Right.
And it's really like it is challenging not to do that because as humans, we are very much designed to create separation. We're designed to be in our group and like people who are not in our group push them away or make them seem like they're not in my group, these people are. But when you're trying to grow a movement, that's not how it works. You want everyone to be a part of your group. You want everyone to feel good about being because we are challenging. We are very much not doing well in mobilization. Not just in DXC, but in the animal rights movement. We need to grow our movement.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think this is a wonderful place to end. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Um,
This was so great. I don't get to have these kind of conversations very often, and I'm really grateful that I got to share all of this.
yeah, anytime you want to talk, I'm always happy to. And I love
Thank
doing this for the same reason. Like I think that a lot of people get to see Priya Sahani disrupting Jeff Bezos now, but
Yeah.
not every day you get to hear what Priya's thoughts are about the terror of death.
Yep.
So this has been
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Thanks
I'll
so
send
much.
you the author of that book. It's really good. I think you'll like it from, some of the even just the little conversation that we've had.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll
and
check it out.
if you're ever in the Bay Area, of course, like you weren't at the conference, were you?
I was not. No, I've only been to. I've only gone once, and it was back when it was still called the DXE Forum.
You should, yeah, it would be great to have you. Like, I know Matt would be thrilled, and we can all, we can see the activist house, the new activist house, and like just hang out with all the people and kind of see all of this for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, definitely be cool to see what's going on now. Um, but yeah, but so I just thank you, and to all of our viewers who are watching this, thanks so much for tuning in. Um,
Thanks, everybody.
yeah, excellent. Thank you. Well, have a great day.